Well, it's good to be with you here, and I've been asked to talk about the social determinants. In fact, everybody's been talking about that, and it's the causes of causes, which the Boyer Lectures, the ABC Boyer Lectures, Sir Michael Marmot spoke about that on that occasion. And I noticed that Kerry Hawkins, in her address, talked about looking at the issue of causes. And I thank Tom for his introduction and welcome to country, and Shane for his observations about Aboriginal health in Australia. It's through the mind that the conditions of childhood, adult life affect every one of us, our behaviours, our physical health, and expose us to risks. The conditions into which people are born, live, work, age, bear on the well-being of every one of us. These social determinants underpin the risks of suicide, of mental health, of alcohol and drug problems. In fact, I was asked to address all of those, which is quite a handful. But additionally, Australia suffers further disadvantages with our remoteness and distance, our contemporary problems of distance, as I've said, our falling wage incomes, loss of affordable housing, and the impact of economic downturns in rural communities. A most powerful influence on the social determinants is impoverishment. In poverty, people lose any real sense that they can make choices and can move towards a relevant future. That is lost. And these issues are not just one-hit issues. They accumulate over time. They compound with each other. And the famous German philosopher Immanuel Kant said the rules of happiness were something to do, someone to love, something to hope for. And that says it all, doesn't it? Someone to love, to be valued by another person, a connected, mutual, sharing relationship, to be important, significant to that other person, listened to by that other person, reflected back to us our thoughts and ideas, and share our experiences, strengthens our feeling of self-worth. And it drives so much of our lives, our motivation, and it helps us engage with the world around us. It's about what's being said already today. It's about being connected. It's about connectedness. Broken connections mean a broken person, a broken community. The World Suicide Prevention Day of 2014 was about creating a connected world. Something to do. I was reading a newspaper as I came in this morning, and a famous scientist said, intelligence not only lies in the head, but it's in the arm, the wrist, and the hand. So creating things, making things are integral to how we develop. To handle things, to make something, to engage our minds in a task strengthens both our body and our minds. It's emotionally satisfying. To make music. Work that we do can define who we are. There's a sense of belonging, a sense of place, a sense of recognition. But there's always a downside. Work can be demeaning, alienating, and devaluing. And to be put out of work increases our mental health problems and illnesses. And during periods of unemployment, mental health tends to deteriorate, alcohol and drug problems increase. Something to look forward to. There are things to do, people to meet. Living's worthwhile. We can lead a contributing life, which was the essence of the early days of the National Mental Health Commission, about everybody being able to lead a continuing life. Life then becomes filled with ongoing projects, life plans, positive thoughts. And that internal world of the person is strengthened by the feedback and engagement with other people. So that great philosopher said it all. But let us fly in a helicopter for a moment and look down on Sydney and on New South Wales. And what we see are mountains in some areas, valleys in others, of the social gradients in our society. Skyscrapers in some places, deep holes in others. And there are literally many studies which show what this slide shows. It shows that people living in the poorest areas have almost double the rates of mental health problems of those who live in the richest areas. And there are many studies of this kind that show that people in higher social positions have better mental health, better physical health, fewer alcohol and drug problems. Although they might consume more alcohol, they have fewer of the problems and a lower suicide risk. And we see the evidence for this in the local hospital, the local courts, the police assault reports and arrests, which reflect what's going on in these communities, these neighbourhoods. And then there are communities which we define in different ways, and some of them will be joining me here on the panel. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, people connected with the criminal justice or juvenile justice system, the LGBTQ plus community. All of these groups have higher risks of mental health and of suicide. And there are certain occupations. There are whole communities which are at risk. And in relation to suicide, middle-aged males and men of my age have the highest risks of suicide, despite the fact we talk a lot about young people's suicide, which are very important. But I couldn't resist talking for a moment about homeless people. I've spent a lot of time working with homeless people. In Australia, they're the poorest of the poor. Of course, mental illnesses can lead to homelessness, but homelessness itself can lead to mental illnesses, use of drugs, use of alcohol. Just think how you might have difficulty sleeping in the streets at night. Bit of grog, some drugs will help you. If you've got pain and you can't get treatment, a bit of grog, a bit of drugs will help you. It's a two-way street. Now this slide, which comes from 1989, and Marie Thiessen, who's being represented here by one of the speakers on the panel, was one of the people that did this work. And to me, this slide has affected my thinking very greatly, because it was a survey done in the night shelters in Sydney. And the columns represent the characteristics of the person that might have suggested that they suffered from certain mental illnesses. And the red columns represent women, and the blue columns represent men. And just look at the top bit. The indicators that someone who was homeless might have schizophrenia. In men, the level was about 20%. In women, it's double that. And if you look down that slide, for most of the medical diagnoses amongst homeless people, the women are the most impaired. And then if we get down to the bottom of that slide and put it all together, roughly 3 out of 4 homeless people had some of the characteristics which could lead to a diagnosis of a major mental health problem. Women who are homeless are the victims, just as we may hear a bit later on in the justice system. Women are again the victims. During the early days of the National Suicide Strategy, which I was involved in, I accepted that mental illness, because I was told this, caused 90% of suicides. I don't think that anymore. Yes, mental illness is a tragic cause of suicide, but it sits alongside and in company of intoxication, addiction, chronic pain problems, many other medical problems. The majority of people who have a mental illness don't die from suicide. They die at much higher rates of the conditions which you and I will suffer from as we approach the end of our lives, but at much higher rates, much shorter lives. But what I want to impress on you is that suicides, in many circumstances, arise out of social predicaments, situations in which people can see no other way out than to take their own lives. The high suicide rates in Aboriginal young people is not an epidemic of mental illness. For them, life has lost its meaning and resonance. They've often, commonly, broken their connectedness. These are lives without meaning, as I've said, connectedness, and no future can be seen. WHO said that no single factor is sufficient to explain why a person dies by suicide. It's a complex phenomenon. Interacting factors, personal, social, psychological, cultural, biological, environmental. Clearly there is a link with mental illness, but it's based on these broad social and other relationships to the individual that predict or lead to the causation of suicides. This is a very messy diagram, and most of you won't be able to see it, I can appreciate that. But it was developed by Sven Silburn in 2003. He was on the Suicide Prevention Council in Western Australia. And what it shows is, from the bottom left-hand corner, birth, to the top right-hand corner, the risk of suicide. And what it describes is vulnerabilities at birth, during development, during family life, during schooling, exposure to hazards, exposure to drugs and alcohol, social and media influences, work and social life. And what I want to make a strong point about is that many of you who are in this audience are working in areas which impinge on those pathways, be they tortuous, as I've said. And you've got a lot to contribute to breaking these pathways in the early trajectory towards problems of mental illness and suicide. But of course, it's not only suicide that these pathways lead to. School failure, mental illness, as I've mentioned, drug and alcohol problems, unemployment, antisocial behaviour, and involvement with the justice system. In 2018, the Senate report into remote and rural mental health said the high suicide rate in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders is a problem of despair. And it's widely recognised now in Western countries that there's a pandemic of diseases of despair. These are suicides, drug and alcohol problems, and alcoholic liver disease. And that despair can be cognitive, emotional, behavioural, biological. They're rising in the US to an incredible extent, in the UK, Scotland, and other OECD countries. They're not quite so high in Australia, which is a good thing. But not only does despair affect individuals, it affects whole communities of people. And if we're really to influence these aspects of public health, the social determinants, it has to involve the whole community. Communities in which people feel respected and valued. You won't be able to read this next slide, I don't think, but it's a statement from C. Wright Mills, a famous American sociologist. When people cherish some set of values and do not feel any threat to them, they experience well-being. So well-being depends on how people are valued in communities. When they cherish values but do not feel them threatened, they experience crisis, either as a personal trouble or as a public issue. And if all their values are involved, they feel threatened or panicky. So what do we need to do? Kerry Hawkins has already referred to work done by Sir Michael Marmot. But Marmot was involved in producing the report for the UN on social determinants, and he's looked at inequality in the United Kingdom, and recently a report, the Marmot Review 10 years on, has just appeared. Doesn't seem to have come up. Oh, I've missed it. Oh well, I'll read it out. And the Marmot Review 10 years on said, these are the things we've got to do. Give every child the best start in life. Good. Enable all children, young people and adults to maximise their capabilities and have control over their lives. So young people, that trajectory early in life where many of you have your occupations and are able to work. Create fair employment and good work for all. Ensure a healthy standard of living for all. Create and develop and healthy and sustainable places and communities. So my emphasis has been about creating that sense of community and connectedness, and that view that everyone that we deal with or relate to is a citizen that has the rights that people have been talking about already, rights to education, health, housing, justice, and the like. And if I had to put my money anywhere, it would be in those early stages of life. So that's, I suggest, where we should start. Thank you.